Okay, now obviously looking at different genres, so I want to do the similar warm-up task that we did with the drama text, and to think about the techniques that we would be potentially looking for and expecting to see in this particular genre. So again, also thinking about dissertations. These are the things that you want to be, these are the techniques you want to be thinking about in terms of relevance to your particular text, relevance to your particular task that you've set yourself. So obviously starting with thematic, so thinking about the main theme that's explored in the text, characterization, character relationships, narrative, technique, and that includes a number of things. So you've got perspective, so where is the person that's telling the story in relation to the story? Is this a first person, or is it a third, and is it combined with second? Remember, the second person narration is a direct address to the audience stroke reader. So there's perspective, and then you've also got narrative voice, which they all come under narrative techniques, they're all part and parcel of the same thing, but it's about, narrative voice is about identification of the voice. Whose voice do we hear? Now, very often, it's anonymous, so we can't actually name them. We can't say it's Bob that we hear speaking in the narrative. But what you can do is you can identify them perhaps because of other useful pieces of information. So for example, if we think about The Handmaid's Tale, very often that's referred to as a prison narrative, because effectively that's the status that our narrator has within the text. And that status will obviously impact on the way that she sees things and the things that she actually sees, so it affects her perspective. So even just because you can't say who the person is narrating doesn't mean to say that you can't talk about narrative voice, because you've also got their status as well as this idea of characterization. Have you got a reliable narrator? Are they unreliable? Are they pessimistic? Are they optimistic? Different aspects of their characterization will come through in their narration. So again, when you're talking about narrative voice, you can talk about aspects of characterization. You may want to think about setting, specifically in terms of times and in terms of place. And perhaps also thinking about the impact and the effect that this setting in time and place would have on the text. Thinking about social values and the historical background of the text and the influence that that might actually have on it. You've also got structure, thinking specifically about perhaps grey tags, analysis of structure, where does this extract fit within that, but also thinking about other structural features. For example, we've got chapters, headings, various other, the way in which sections are marked. Do we have any symbolism, motifs? Do we have any intertextuality? Intertextuality is a text within a text. So have they lifted another piece of the text in it? So, for example, is there an extract from a letter that someone has written that forms part of the narrative? So again, looking at that. Genre. What genre have we got here? Is it a tragedy? And again, depending on the extract, you might not be able to ascertain that. You might not be able to work that out. But equally, if it's something they're expecting you to write about, it'll be because it's something that's really obvious and distinct about the extract that was collected. So that's the sort of things that we're thinking about. That's quite a substantial list to think about while you're reading this extract, but you're going to do exactly the same thing. Now, what I didn't do, which I need to do before I start, is to actually read the question. And here's a perfect example where the SQA, on this occasion, actually put the question after the text. Discuss the effectiveness of some of the principal means by which After Ben presents Oronoko's experiences. So I would just make a bullet point like that, presentation experiences, how just I've got real clarification at the forefront of my mind what it is I'm actually looking for. And then we go back and we read the stuff in italics, because remember, it can be really helpful, the stuff in italics, in helping us place the extract within the larger text, but also perhaps giving us suggestions about the sort of thematic things that might be explored, or anything that could just be helpful with our analysis. So the text was written in 1688, so it's quite old. Okay, that would be the first thing that I would be aware of. And I would expect that to have an impact on the language that's used. And I would expect that to present me with a challenge in terms of being able to deconstruct and understand what is actually going on. Now, as long as you recognise that that's a potential challenge, then you can tackle it. Okay? And it is about recognising what the challenge is going to be. And again, when you're thinking about text selection and text analysis, that might be a factor that either persuades you or dissuades you from actually having a look at that particular text. So in this extract which ends the novel, so now we can place it, we're placing it at the denouement, potentially a catastrophe, don't know yet. The narrator recalls the death of Prince Urunuko, who, along with his wife, was living as a slave in the West Indies. I'm thinking tragedy at the moment. So they took the Christian names of Caesar and Clement. Previous to killing his pregnant wife, Urunuko was petitioned to be allowed to return to homeland, and when this was ignored, had encouraged a slave revolt. The revolt failed and ends with his allies punishing him at the command of the deputy governor against whom he had been revolting. He decides to avenge his honour, but feels he has to kill his wife to stop her being punished after his death. Well, that's quite complicated, and that you need to take a minute to think about, because I suppose it's about your moral judgment. You know, it's this grey area of who's right and who's wrong. Is the goodie really a goodie, or do they do things that perhaps make it a little bit more complex, a bit more controversial? So I think that's probably going to be one of the things that you want to be thinking about. So, you know, we may well be able to clearly mark who's the protagonist and who's the antagonist, but equally are we going to have to look at some of the features or some of the events in the novel and think about the protagonist perhaps in a more condemnatory light. So, right, all that love could say in such cases being ended and all the intermitting irresolutions being adjusted, the lovely, young and adorned. There we've got a perfect example of an abbreviation. So if you look at adored, as it's written there, you'd be forgiven for not knowing what that word actually is, but if you think about the fact that the apostrophe is marking the deletion of certain letters, it can help you work out what the word actually is. Victims lay herself down before the sacrificer, while he, with a hand resolved and a heart breaking within, gave the fatal stroke, first cutting her throat, then severing her yet smiling face from its delicate body, pregnant as it was with the fruits of tenderest love. So I would annotate that, because what's important there is not just the fact that he kills his wife, look at the way he does it. As soon as he had done, he laid the body decently on leaves and flowers, of which he made a bed. I find it, what's throwing me here is the use of capitalisation. When I first started reading it, I thought maybe there was a character called Love and then a character called Casey, because they're capitalised, but obviously this is just reflective of the time in which the text was created. So let's try and ignore that. As soon as he had done, he laid the body decently on leaves and flowers, of which he made a bed, and concealed it under the flame-covered lid of nature. Only her face he left bare to look on. But when he found she was dead and past all the trees, never more to bless him with her eyes and soft language, his grief swelled up to rage. He tore, he raved, he roared, abbreviations again, like some monster of the wood, calling on the loved name of whoever that is. 1,000 times he turned the fatal knife that did the deed towards his own heart, with a resolution to go immediately after her, but dire revenge, which was now 1,000 times more fierce in his soul than before, prevents him, and he would cry out, "No, since I have sacrificed her to my revenge, shall I lose that glory which I have purchased so dear, as at the price of fairest, dearest, softest creature that ever nature made." So, thinking about his characterisation here, it's quite complex. I don't know if I go as far to say it's kind of contradictory, but I'm not sure how I can reconcile what he's done and how he feels about her and how that's possible. We've also got the fact that the idea had been that he kills her, then he kills himself, but he decides, actually, I won't do that. I will kill her and I will go and seek revenge.